I know some of you are saying, well, why would I want to bother sacking my horse out very thoroughly with a tarp? Well, watch in this next couple clips here and watch this horse and think to yourself, would I want to work on this horse's feet? Would this horse be good for me to work on his feet? In this next clip, watch this horse and think, would I want to get on a horse that couldn't do this? This is a good test to see how he handles unusual things on his back, or if maybe I moved a little bit the wrong way, or my raincoat made a little rustling noise. Oh boy. Does he look like he'd be reasonably calm for you to do something like take his temperature? Does he look like maybe he wouldn't kick out at you or fuss if you had to do something around his rear feet or his tail, say if he was injured? Sacking a horse out with a tarp isn't a cure-all. There's no one thing that can cure every spooky or irrational thing that a horse can do, but sacking a horse out correctly to a tarp can make your horse a lot calmer than it was before you started. One thing that you need to be careful of when you're sacking out a horse is to make sure you do it correctly, because if you do it incorrectly, you can actually make the horse more spooky. I have a funny situation with my horse where a man told me that he could teach my horse not to steal people's hats anymore, because my horse loves to steal people's hats. Well, the man didn't teach my horse not to steal hats. What he actually taught my horse was that when you steal a hat, you better run like hell. So you need to really understand how to sack out a horse and how to do different things like this before you get involved in it, because you can actually make your situation worse if you don't really understand the concepts. This is an informational video, not a training video, about sacking a horse out with a tarp and the benefits of doing this with a horse. I try to give you as many pointers as I think I can, but it's not a detailed description of every step that you would do to accomplish this. It's more an overview of what you should be able to accomplish with your horse, with a few suggestions tossed in there that I think you might not hear elsewhere. Before I get into the tarp work, I'm going to go over a few things that I think you should know and things that you should be able to do with your horse before you jump into tarp work. If you don't start out at a really low level of sacking a horse out and work your way up, you can make a horse more spooky, you can make them more dangerous, and you can make it harder to overcome the issue. Maybe even impossible to overcome the issue. So you need to start out low and you need to work up. And I'm going to be really blunt for a minute and very serious when I say that you need to leave your ego at the gate. Whenever you're doing sacking out with a horse, you should never be saying, I need to make this horse do this. Why can't I make this horse do this? You can take the word make and you can take the word out and put the word force in, and it'll be the same sentence. Why can't I make the horse do this? Why can't I force the horse to do this? That is someone who is in the wrong frame of mind to be sacking that horse out. You should never be trying to force a horse when you're sacking it out. What you're trying to do when you're sacking a horse out is teach the horse how it can handle its emotions and get along with you at the same time. You're working on a balance between the two of you. You're not trying to force him to do anything. When you take a horse and you force him to stand absolutely still and not move and accept an object, flood him with the object till he stands still, what you're doing is you're teaching him to internalize the tension. And you do that over and over and over again, and the horse just builds up that tension until one day it blows up when it can't stuff any more tension. The other point I want to make is when a horse flings its head When you first put a tarp over a horse's head or something over the horse's head, his instinct is going to be to pull his head up or pull it back or twist it away. Don't worry about that issue so much. That issue will go away because that is not a problem. Flinging the head, pulling the head, flapping the head around, that I've never ever seen it be the problem. It's a symptom of a problem, and you don't want to work on the symptoms of a problem. You want to work on the problem. If you see a horse flinging his head, then you realize you have a problem. But you don't want to force him to hold his head still thinking that's going to fix your problem, because it's not. It's a symptom of the problem. Once you fix the actual problem, that will go away.
That's a good boy back there.
Chap's been taught that if he puts his head down, I'll remove the spooky. You just saw him do that. I taught him that because if he's spooking out over something, it's far easier to take off a halter or an item off the horse if its head is down low. If you're not laughing and smiling and joking around, at least at some point during a training session, then you're missing out and you're taking things way too seriously. You're probably being too aggressive with your horse, too dominating, too in control. You need to back off a little bit, ease up. Don't feel so much tension in yourself, then the horse won't feel so much tension in it. And then you won't need to be so dominant, so in control. Let loose a little bit. When you're sacking a horse out to an item, a lot of times the problem that they have is when you cross from one side to the other, from one eye to the other. Cap's had a lot of sacking out, so that's not an issue with him. But many horses, that's the problem you run into mostly, is the crossing from eye to eye, in the front and in the back. You'll notice he's standing still because I haven't asked him to move. Focus movement, non-focus movement. It's like you pointing and asking someone to go somewhere versus you're waving hello. It's different, and horses recognize the difference. You'll notice he's not looking to move. That's because my movement doesn't indicate that he should move. If you have a horse that's been lunged, when you first start this, make sure you don't look at the horse. Sometimes horses that have been lunged a lot will move just because you look at them and you move. So start out not looking at them, and then gradually you can do it better when you are looking at them. A horse should handle a bag and stick that well before you move on to trying to sack him out with a tarp. But you should be able to flap stuff around its head and jump around and be able to do things without the horse becoming excited. You should be able to do that. When you decide to sack out a horse and do a lesson that involves sacking out, you should have a goal in mind. It's more than just flapping an item around a horse and getting it to stand still. you have different things that you can be working on. Later in this video, I'm going to show you the next level of training that I'm working on with my horse. And in that situation, I need him to be a little bit spooked, because I want him to learn that when he does spook over something, that I want him to stop, and then I can remove the spooky. Just as you've seen earlier in this video where he puts his head down to remove the spooky, I'm going to teach him that if he gets something tangled in his tail, he should stop so that I can remove the spooky. And when I do this, he needs to be a little bit concerned, but not overly concerned, to be able to do that. Now, on the other hand, if you were trying to teach a horse to tolerate having things flapped around him, you would approach it differently. You would start out farther away from the horse and farther back in the process, because you wouldn't want the horse to be reacting at all. You would want him to not react, and then you'd move closer and closer and closer and closer. So you can see from those two examples, and there are many, many more different things that you could be trying to accomplish with tarp work and bag work, but you really need to know what the goal is before you start. Don't just go out there and start whipping stuff around without having any idea of what you're teaching.
Thank you. I didn't have to bend you over, huh?
In a recent video, I mentioned that while doing training on the ground with my horse, I allow him to take the initiative to go and do a couple different tricks to calm himself down and get himself refocused. And someone asked me recently what those tricks are. And one of them is that I allow him to, at any point in time, go over and pick his barrel up and knock it over and get a treat for it. Once he does that, he'll just mosey on back over, and he'll be in a better frame of mind. He'll be more focused. It's better, I think, to let him do that than to try and make him focus. It's kind of like you're working with a 2-year-old child. It's very difficult to make a 2-year-old child focus beyond their attention span. The reason why that's relevant in this video is that I also want to mention that when you teach a horse tricks, it stimulates their mind. If you're always doing a certain type of training, like you're always doing training for jumping, you're always doing training for showing, you're always doing training for cutting horses, you're always doing the same training for trail riding. If you mix it up and you teach them how to do tricks, it'll stimulate their mind, because it'll be something different. It'll be like yourself. You do the same thing over and over and over again, and then you learn scuba diving, and your mind is re-stimulated. And tricks will do the same thing for a horse. So each time I do something with my horse, I teach him a new trick. And the trick that I taught him working with the tarp is that he picks the tarp up and gives it to me.
Thank you. Good job. That's what I mean, huh? It's a good.
I'm going to show you a quick little solution that my Pepe used to use with horses back when I was a kid. My Pepe was an auctioneer, and horses coming into the auction had to be able to follow other horses and other cows and have them behind them, in front of them, around them, without them being afraid of them. Who'd want to buy a horse that couldn't handle being around a cow? And so this became Follow the Cow. And what my Pepe would do is have one kid lead the horse, one kid lead a cow, and the horse that was afraid of the cow would be led behind the cow at a distance that it was safe with it and quiet and just a little bit curious. And as you walked the cow around with the horse behind the cow, the horse would suddenly get very interested, like, wow, this cow is more afraid of me than I'm afraid of it, and it would start to catch up with the cow. And you can use this same technique with any item. I'm showing you here an example of my horse following the tarp. If you had a horse that was really afraid of the tarp, you could do this. You could get the horse to follow you at a far distance, and if you kept just walking around with him following you, if you looked over your shoulder, you'd see that after a little bit he'd be like, this isn't so bad, and he'd start to try and get closer to you. you're stacking out a horse, it's good to make sure their feet are reasonably straight. He's actually cocking one, but you don't want bracing to leave before you actually do something with him. Try not to expect too much from your horse in the beginning or at any time in the process, or really any time you're training your horse. This horse was 4 months old when I got him. He's a PMU foal out of Manitoba, Canada. And I started bag work with him when he was 4 months old. He's now 9 years old. I started tarp work back then, but not that early because I did the bag work first. But the point I'm trying to make is that he's done both for years of time. And I don't just go out and spend days at a time doing tarp work. What I do is, if I see that the next level of tarp work or the next level of bag work would help me teach him something that I want to teach him, then I teach him that next level. So it's not a race to get to the end of tarp work, it's utilizing it to help the horse learn new things. Good boy! Sit down.
So what the heck is that?
This video is already much longer than what I wanted it to be or expected it would be. But I want to show you real quickly the lesson that I mentioned earlier that I'm working on with my horse. This was his first time doing it, and you'll see that he was a little bit spooky, but he needed to be a little bit spooky to accomplish what I wanted to teach him. What I'm working on teaching him here is very similar to what I taught him with putting his head down to remove the spooky. I'm teaching him that if he gets something caught up in his tail and it frightens him a little bit, his best option is to stop so I can remove it. And you'll see he was a little bit nervous, and you can see where he thought about it. Should I stop? Should I stop? And then he finally stopped and let me untie it. And I want to mention also that that wasn't tied securely to his tail. It was pretty much wrapped around once, and if I stepped on it, it would have released it from his tail immediately. He would have never been able to get it caught on anything. He wouldn't have gotten too far without it coming off on its own. And this is really a high-level training activity. It's not something that should be done by just anyone. You should be a trainer and know what you're doing and have had training in this area, and the horse should be at a high level of training also. You should never put the horse or yourself in jeopardy. Also, in this case with this horse, I'm like 98% sure that that horse wouldn't run me over. There are many horses that would just run right over the top of you if they got even a little bit frightened in this situation. I'm showing this not to teach you how to train your horse to do this. I'm showing this to show you that there are different reasons why you sack out a horse with an item. That it's not just to go out and shake items around them for no reason at all. There are different goals, and you should always have a goal in mind. Ho. Good boy. Good boy. I take your ear. Go down. Ho. Ho. Good job. Good job, Bubby. Very nice work. Very, very nice work. Very, very good job. I don't think you can help but notice that I have a lot of fun with my horse and I do a lot of joking around with him. And he's just as forgiving of me as I am of him if something doesn't go just right. he doesn't hold me to too high of a standard, just as I don't hold him to too high of a standard. Too many people try to be the alpha, and they don't realize that the alpha horse, she's certainly in control of the group. She's also a social member of the herd. So if you're truly being alpha with your horse, then sure, you need to be the leader, but you also need to be socially interacting with that horse. It's not all a grind. There's fun involved too. I also don't think that everyone out there should be training their own horse. A person who's going to train a horse should have some experience and training, and the horse should have a level of training that's adequate for them to work with. The videos that I post here on YouTube are not training videos. They're informational videos that I put out there to show people the different things that I think they can go out and learn how to train their horses to do, so that they'll have a better partnership with their horse. And I hope that today I've expanded your imagination a little bit and gave you something to go out and learn.